Okay, so this will be just kind of a simple tutorial, but I cannot stress how important the concepts of this are as it relates to being successful with color from a numerical computational standpoint. And also I'm going to introduce a new function that is your friend to help make sure that things are proportional to each other, even if they don't equal each other. Sounds kind of cryptic, but I will explain in a second. So in this tutorial, all I want to do is I've created a for loop here to position some cubes across the screen. And I made the math pretty simple. I can show maybe how it can mess that up later. So 100 units is my tile size. So this is the size of these rectangles that got a little tiny bevel on them. And I did something just kind of silly in here. I just created a fill, and I'm going to use this X. What I want to do is use this X value so that the colors change as the tiles get placed across the screen. In fact, what I would like them to do is, in essence, create a rainbow, because it's very pretty, right? And right now it's doing a kind of transition, but it has a couple problems. So right now I'm using the default color space, which is RGB. So 255, 255, 255, right? 0 to 255 in the red, in the green, in the blue channel. So we're used to using that in various contexts. The problem is just how do we numerically move those colors? I mean, in Photoshop, we just pick colors. We say, I want this one, I want this one. But how can I make a transition using just with numbers? How can I tell the fill to basically select the colors that I want that are, I don't know, related to the rainbow or something? And in doing that in RGB, it is exceedingly difficult. But in a different color mode, hue, saturation, and brightness, this is pretty easy. So I've got a little website here, just went and found. What is this? Computer Science for All from the NYC Department of Education. Oh, look at this. They're doing some stuff with the P5 as well, right? So, but what I really care about is this diagram, right? So we have this cylinder of color, and the way that we map this out, so RGB is just 0 to 255, but in HSB land, the hue, what we kind of think of as the color, right? But this is the hue is based on this wheel, and it goes from 0 to 360, which would bring us right back to red, right? So green's 120, blues, bluish green in this 200 range. And color is kind of a tricky thing. Green just perceptually kind of dominates, and it doesn't have as much separation as maybe what we see in some of these others. But that's its own thing. All right, so that's the hue. And then the saturation is the amount of color, if we want, and that's not really the way to think of it, but just that saturation of the color, right? Is it just white with a little bit of the hue in there, or is it fully saturated as we see here? And then we have the value. So this is like little thin slices of the color wheel, but it gets brighter or darker, right? So the lightness, the saturation, and the hue as we spin around this little dial. And the nice thing about this is maybe I could set the saturation to a certain number and the value to something, let's just say 80 and 80. And if I just change the hue and have it move all the way around, I will get a complete rainbow, right? This is the rainbow. This is what I would like to see in my, my little example. Okay, so, and also if you want to, you could go to Adobe Color here. And it's got a little wheel and various color schemes that you can choose, like a triad or something like that. And the interesting thing about this is that we get these numerical values, but these, right now, I can see how the saturation is pretty close. There's a little bit of a program that, based on the perception of color, is adding some little tweaks to that. But the brightness is similar or could be the same if I wanted to, and the saturation is very similar or could be the same. And really all I'm doing is changing the position within the wheel of where that hue is selected. So let's do this in our sketch. So and here's our example, right? This is RGB, and it starts out with green because at first X equals 0. The next one, it turns into grayish mud. Then it becomes more red, and then it's just red the whole entire time because this value exceeds 255. So it's just full on red with a little bit of green and a little bit of blue inside of there. So if I, just so we can see this happen, if I made this 0, right? So I can do a little transition like that where I go from 0 up into the color using RGB, but I can't make my way all the way around the wheel if I'm going to do it that way. So let me put these back to 80, and let me put this back to 80. Okay, so let's go back up here to the Create Canvas. And as I said, the default color mode is just RGB. I don't have to type that because that's just the default. But here, I'm going to make a switch. So let's say the color mode, and this is in camel case so that the second word is capitalized. More about that later, maybe. And then we're going to say HSB. I'm not actually sure if you have to type all this to get it to actually go to these default numbers, but I always think it's important to just put them in there so you can remember that the hue goes from 0 to 360. The brightness, the saturation goes from 0 to 100. I think it actually goes to 99, but I'm just going to use 100. And the brightness goes to 100, so 0 to 100. And then the alpha, or the transparency, is just 0 to 1. And that's just the way it is. I didn't make these rules, right? But the intensity of these others makes pretty good sense, right? Because it goes from the center all the way out to the edge. It goes from the top all the way to the bottom within that cylinder. And then 360 is 360 degrees. So just even with that, let's see what happens. So we're getting something, right? I get red, I get green, I get blue, I get purple, and then we get back to red again, and then it just stays red. So why is that? Well, it's because I'm using this X value, and the X starts at 0, and it goes, as long as it's less than the width, it increments 100 units, right? So it moves 100 by 100 by 100 by 100. And this is because I want these to fit within the window perfectly, at least because my canvas is 1000 by 1000. So that's helpful, but they don't equal each other, right? What I need is something that goes from 0 to 360. Right now, my X is going from 0 to 999, right? I'll just say 1000, so 0 to 1000. And I need them to be proportional to each other, but I don't want them to be exactly the same. So what we can use is a map function. And boy, this thing can save you in so many different instances, because you're like, hey, I like the incremental change that's happening, but I just need it to do it in a smaller or a larger range, but I can still use those numbers. So let's create a new variable called C, and we'll just use this for, let's call it hue, right? Oh, actually, I'll call it, I don't think I can use hue. I'll just use 8. I'm going to use C, right? C is my cut. I'm going to use that as color. I can't use the word hue. It's kind of a key word. So I'm going to have this variable C, and it's going to be equal to, it's going to give me a number, and that number is going to be a mapped value. And the way this thing works is it gives me a value, and I'm just going to spell this out. So this is the old minimum and the old maximum, and then I want the new minimum and the new maximum, right? So if I go to the documentation, this is what I would see in here, right? So I don't have any variables that I'm using for this. So if I take X and put it in here, and then I know that the old minimum it starts at 0, and the maximum for that is going to be the width, right, across the screen, then I can tell that range to be mapped or remapped into a new minimum to a new maximum. So this is going to be X. And as we just said, it starts at 0. That's the lowest number that X is in this scenario using this for loop. And the largest number that it is the width. Actually would be well, we'll just use that. That would be fine. I'm going to show how to tweak this later. And then the lowest number that would be is 0. And if we go to our color wheel, right, 0 to 360. Or here, right, from 0 to 100 on these saturation and brightness. But we just want the hue, so 360. And then let's just put C right there. Oh, I've already used it in there. It doesn't like that, I guess. I don't know. So we'll just say 1000. It's kind of bizarre, actually. Okay. So you can see I get this nice clean rainbow. It's not, so I guess it would be totally perfect in that if it went a little off the screen, I would get, this one would be over here, would be the next one as it gets to that point. So it's just incrementing across the wheel and rotating around. Maybe here's another way we could look at this. Let's just say that I want this to be 210. So that's the hue. And actually what I want to do is move through the saturation. So I'm going to make this be C, and I'm going to change this value back to 100. So I'm going to remap the X so that it takes whatever value is and makes it fit proportionally within the 0 to 1000 range between a 0 and 100. Now this one's easier, right? I could do a little math if I really wanted to. So you can see I go from this low saturation all the way to this full saturation. Let's go back to the original example here and leave it in 80 and 80. So let's say I don't want to go all the way through the rainbow. I actually want to go from red up to blue. So let's say 210. So this is where the map function comes in real helpful, because I don't have to figure out all the math. I can just say, you know what? I know you're going to give me these numbers, X, somewhere between 0 and 1000. Just make sure that these are scaled down so they fit between 0 and 210. Right? So now I'm going to get this up to blue. Or maybe what I really want to do is something up to this green. So I don't know. I think that's 140-ish maybe. Or maybe what we'll do is 140 up to 240. So we'll move from the green to blue. In fact, let's move this down just a little. Right, so they all have the same saturation and they have the same brightness. And of course, I could modulate that if I wanted to. At this point, I just want to let the colors move through. It maps perfectly within the space, right? So within this range, I can fit color spatially onto my canvas, which we've kind of done in class. I mean, we've used those numbers, but I wanted to go back and kind of put it into a tutorial, make it very clear why HSB is our friend, and how the map function is our friend, right? The map allows us to take a range of numbers and scale them up or down to fit within a new range of numbers. And I can actually do this backwards too. I can say, well, the low end is 0, right, where it's going to start over here, and I want it to go from this blue, right? So what it does is it inverts. It says the low the low value is 240, excuse me, and the high value is actually 0. Right, so it would change the range as it moves across, right? So now it starts with the blue and makes its way over into the orange. It doesn't quite get to the red because X never quite gets there, gets to that. It's actually, the range would probably be 9, there we go. Because as we count, because this rectangle mode is in the corner mode, right? 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. And because it says equal to or less than, it never quite gets to that, right? Because I don't really need that other rectangle off the side of the screen. So just keep in mind what your range is, what you're using in here. There's fancy ways to figure out what these numbers are if you're doing some complicated math. But just know that you can invert the mapping of these values if needed. And you just feed it in here and look at it do all that work for you. All right, 15 minutes, 30 seconds, perfect. I hope that helps.